We all good to go? Alright.
The advantage is disease. It's a non-linear existential risk. Encompasses and outweighs all the threats. It's payload on Part 15. Risk is probably times impacts for civilization, collapse, suffering, not recover, are infinite. The results of irreversible peer review or poison to get those can happen. The probability is increasing. Sustainable tendency to exclude impacts will probably define for some reason for invisibility of infinite impacts, cultural weapons system, infinite impacts, dominant by groups, necessary society, that scientific fact is one people, which is fundamentally different as focus on scientific evidence from peer reviewed sources, impacts, the survival of human life and earth from an ethical perspective, no positive gain. I can outweigh even a small probability of money. Traditional risk, including wars of decreased physiological brains, or poorly corrupt, no response to psychological denial, ignoring present probably covered approach cannot be trial and error. Some must take preventative action here. The cost moral and economical risks outside our experience. Collective fear response will be ill-calibrated. Thresholds become invisible. They occur from the future. Even if current actions unbalance the system of humanity, people belong path we may find a morally repelling consequence and not clearly cut the appended value judgment that would be contagious on shared enduring poverty and nevertheless not sufficient to threaten humanity without system collapse of panic. Both would have the greatest cause of mortality. History, replanning, historic intelligence, reveals so power. Others fall power law of the small exponent. Those who are heavy tailed. The majority will die from a single largest pandemic. Will have such will have a great probability than usually single all features usually existing in nature, incurable, fatal, and extremely infectious, long incubation periods of passion and combining these and influence to demonstrate that antigenic shift. Their deaths will be extreme. The will of change making past comparisons to problematic modern transport dense population and infections just spread rapidly. The ripple effect include political act, disruption, economic dislocation, damage, trade at the epidemic fragments human society. They accept the recovery becomes impossible. Force humanity succumbs to other risks such as climate for the pandemics, unpredictable zoonosis creates an invisible brink for new outbreaks. That's Rosenberg 17 Ebola, SARS, Zika, MERS, flu, swine flu, Lassa fever, Marburg, Group Valley, another whole range of pathogens rapidly go from outbreak to epidemic to pandemic. There's not going with zoonosis can never be eradicated. Spanish will kill the death toll today might be even higher. Spend all capitals in 60 years with mobility, population pressures, and climate change. Burnout is wrong for diseases that spread in the U.S. That's Barium 16 or aggressive change through transportation to escape local extinction. There's a point that which the entire population has with the increasing global transportation human civilization approaching a critical threshold. Historical evidence is not a good guiding key about the transition to extinction. Suddenness destables by a few more long range connections close to typical one years have a highly connected super spread that was much greater risk of unstoppable. The magnitude of the threat justifies an escalated clause for utilitarian calculations. This avoids abuses while ensuring just outcomes at the tail end of risk. That's Kirkwood 9. In pandemics that those will harm large numbers of public health demands attention to utils while limitation of worst case scenario in writing so utils not afford a strong rules consider against extreme position of moderate performing their actions should increase negatives. However, there must be an escalated clause in the event of a threat to existence of population. The greater the threat, the greater the force of util, the greater the moral impetus to random harm. Pandemics would fundamentally undermine life. This place for responsibility on those who can reduce the body count and grow the public health. There is one view and consequence without there's an extreme case such equilibrium takes a heightened obligation. Intervening at the point of care is key, though causes of illness are multiple and no single intervention can eliminate them. That's Hirschfield 17. Scholars substitute moral argument in place of objective historical research. Epidemics predictable configured by human immunity and real social environment play a role, but overlights and structural amounts of racist variation explains all epidemics with one predetermined unfalsifiable narrative, vaguely defined level of structure. So some 21st century miasma or paid for some scientific theory that contributes little to understanding. Raising the threat level is important key to national and international response to disease when combined with our public health response advocacy. It is demilitarizing. That's JV 17 for the last few decades. Scientists have developed to play the health security card to achieve critical goals and securitization on global leadership and resource health. There's low priority rank through the most nation building because health involves national interest, power, and diplomatic conference interests have been critical. The agreements and issues of security mandate top the foreign policy hierarchy of security not one-dimensional sought to protect individuals much as states where the focus on security was not seen as unequal presence of human rights and sovereignty responsibility. Language security discourse help capture attention was not the only tool played. Neither did its place. Other discourse is the operationalization of initiatives dominated discussion form and then framing language is all part of discourse committed to continuing discussion of institutional design. The key priorities between international initiatives to achieve health goals, specifically preemptive securitization, is key. Both the 1AC and current security discourse will only be operationalized during a pandemic, but starting early primes the public for effective preventative care and patient response. That's Cook 10. Pandemic would be multi-sectoral existential. That's in the military, the political, social needs of air travel makes it possible for disease to disseminate early 2000. The government was beginning to identify pandemic as a threat in spite of concern the public remains more concerned about the cost and availability. America's attention to these seems event-driven, being when there were new cases and decreasing rapidly when disease seemed contained. Perceptions were highest in early stage of outbreaks. There's no lack of acceptance of securitization by the public elite actors engaged in selling anticipation of future securitizing moves, active naked securitizing move, engagement of future extraordinary measures, and let the issue return to previous agenda. Have actors and devoted security with intense security rhetoric sets the stage for a crisis in the future, establishing a precedent that could eventually be securitized. This action opens the policy window that was limited policy making that could be useful in the future. Pandemic that can improve preparation for with the pandemic before one begins an increasing efficacy response. What's has to be undertaken? Even the most extreme forms of securitization don't cause military interventions. That's still at 12. Desperate times can always require desperate intervention measures. Those who have been visible and advocating recognition as a turnout for health and military development to oriented recommendations. Examples include access to medication of the advocacy for securitization and has included military imposition of isolation and quarantine. UN declared HIV a threat and at the same time advocate a human rights approach. Important counterexample of the notion that framing national security terms involves extreme response. The claim that the characterization may eventually lead to extreme measures. Even if that was not the intention, is at best questionable. Infringing on individual autonomy is justified in this context, even if no other, because disease is a negative externality and no one internalizes the cost. That's Widows 13. Autonomy has become dominant, have a choice to not trump other concerns. The charge of paternalism negates and silences other claims to boogeyman of contemporary ethics. All these claims on the wholly sound, satisfactory realities. Governance would have the impulsive choice can never be constrained. All regulation is constrained choices. This unethical is not as clearly. Not come because they're also important and less come because they're protecting individuals. It will suffer. It's not sustainable for rich individuals to use the percentage of the resources they do and for all they have in medicine group because they're valuable because they benefit individuals. The assumption that the evil scientists or tyrannical regime have become embedded of fear which shows legitimate extended illegitimate concepts where where the individual actually benefits community or global goods is using no respect to report. Some will be more affected. The poor and disease will be more vulnerable. Ultimately, all of us self-associates are also supremely valuable in human survival. Accordingly, they should be priorities under any ethical framework unless collective goods are protected. Human survival of the human species will be threatened. The exaggerated fear of paternalism is small compared to the overall cost of the concerns of threats of the concerns about threats to the individual extended so far beyond the harms that it was absurd. Wars about curtailing choice or undermining the survival of all. Starting with an understanding of subjectivity as relational rather than atomistic, creates an ethical obligation to mitigate healthcare inequalities through a single payer and refuses individualist neoliberal logic. That's Berens. 17 autonomy seems to find that so a person's relational being says is harmed by ethical discourse notions excessively individualistic. You can't be human by yourself. When we think of ourselves as separate, whereas what you do affects the entire world. Choices not only affect themselves but also impact the community and individuals. So whether from the egalitarian left or modern market-oriented directed people maximum liberty, American bias as the ethicist error, and that autonomy is a productive disorder worldview. Those who challenge may be motivated by negative social and psychological effects related to atomistic tendencies of modern liberal society's practice contributed to the alienation of the political unbridled greed, loneliness, crime, increasing inequality with co-commit social ills, resulting in the erosion of communal life. The U.S. must move toward the common good. The U.S. must move more of an universal health coverage principle, or emphasize more autonomy, less even strong individuals, communities, but do not really think autonomy is all that matters. Respect for persons reflects what is important far better than autonomy. Plan. The United States federal government should establish a single-payer national system of healthcare financing covering medically necessary care covering medically necessary care. Solvency. It solves mortality and financial precarity. Gaffney 18. Coverage had a productive effect. 3 quasi-experimental difference in studies than most longitudinal studies support, and then associated with an odds of dying ratio of dying insured versus uninsured ratio of 0.97. The Organ study was undercovered because the coverage had a beneficial impact on patient hospice care access and use self-rated health as well as mortality. 28 million uninsured produces unacceptable of unnecessary death and suffering. The nation state is the only way to solve care. That's Ruger 14 meeting. Health needs requires functioning national system of the nation state central and embracing and redistributing revenue, the employment policy and enforcing policy through legal system. Nation states are best positioned to provide systems and services. Healthcare are proximal controllable. Health determines every person must be able to obtain care. Stewardship of the health system is critical. Targeting demands for a single payer at the federal government builds cross-cultural solidarity and prevents our gains from being rolled back. That's staying ground 17. The challenge is to build durable organization that can effectual change single payer can that increase social organizing capacity and build real working class power for long-term struggle. Single focus helps convey the awareness to win campaigning against tactic and a service of a larger strategy. Help build internal structures and organizing skills among a new generation of grassroots left activists. Single payer is a central strategic focus in entirely we build solidarity across different power for the working class. Everyone needs healthcare. Everybody has been heard about private insurance, political education, foster shared self-interest about the foundation of solidarity builds to last. Single payer solves. One is preventative focus, decreasing financial and procedural barriers to seeking care, makes patients more likely to report illness and centralizes planning. That's lady 14. Let's make it a stage from the integrated resource system that guarantees care with a dedicated funding source. Single payer versus a fragmented approach to responsibility because it's governed by private corporations only accountable to their shareholders, not exactly access based on ability to pay technology, difficulty gaining admission, habit every day reveals the fatal inadequacies. Only integration plan, resource, and authority can protect from pandemic. Central planning scheme to focus on preventative medicine and research. That's Can-17 disease emerging in the U.S. and developed countries. The public health is fragmented, underfunded. The public administration reacts to outbreaks other than take a precautionary approach. The U.S. needs single payer to reorder healthcare priorities from public care. Funding of public health systems include vector control, emerging disease research, and vaccine diagnostic development. Changing this change necessary to protect global health and community quality are tied to infectious disease exploding to full-blown epidemics globally. Second is early detection, encouraging patients to seek care makes outbreak detection faster. That's key to solve emerging outbreaks in the U.S. and break the chain of transmission. That's Con 17. HC would leave 51 million uninsured people seeking health care. Once they seek it, they're given less attention. This becomes a changer for the public and citizens to hack the false public health communicable. They're waiting what is supposed to they're sending off a pandemic to use healthcare less able to handle a crisis. The only way to prepare for pandemics or by terror. Single payer, no circumvention. That's Brock 17. Nationwide insurance program would save billions in admin costs rather than have 51 separate ad systems. Plus Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare issues, and taxes, and each separate no door. Politicians can place tickets on the scale. Single payer can be run as a semi-autonomous utility with minimal interference. No rationing either. That's 1 Thomas 17. Single payers saying England have limited wait times. So within Canada, there's been success tackling wait times in prior years. So study found all provinces prior radiation therapy within the benchmark time continues are comparable for next 8 appointments as well as specialized test costs hinder timeliness where people chose not to seek care or fill prescriptions. The American approach reduces wait through gaps.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
My first question concerns, I guess, the plan's scope of coverage. I obviously don't need you to list every single procedure that would be covered, but can you give me an idea of what the plan is tied to in terms of medically necessary care? Like, is it essential health benefits, Bernie's plan, or?
It's not the essential health benefits. Medically necessary is a vague enough term for your pick out of pediatric oral care to not compete, but it's a broad enough term to encompass most basic care services.
What piece of evidence describes that?
We'll read evidence describing what medically necessary care is.
Can you just describe how it's determined?
Sure, go ahead.
So the precise boundaries of what is medically necessary is determined on an individual basis within the patient-physician interaction.
Okay, so the physician gets to decide what's medically necessary?
The physician does not get to decide. We do not endorse a model in which the physician gets to determine what is a legitimate health concern It is a dialogic process in which patients and physicians come to that intersubjective
Excellent.
conclusion.
Your Dan Brown evidence says that single payer is key to build, solidarity. With whom is the F in solidarity with?
Well, our evidence says that single payer catalyzes movements broadly. It doesn't cite any specific ones, but it says that it is a broader point of leftist organizing because everyone needs healthcare and lots of groups, regardless of...
Which movements, though?
Our evidence doesn't say specific ones.
Then why are those movements good?
I just said there are no those movements because the card just says that it is a key, it is a pillar for leftist organizing broadly. You can read more evidence that cites specific movements. I don't know why this is such a focal point. It's like, this card is good about how it catalyzes movements
Like,
broadly.
it lists a couple of organizations that have endorsed the single payer, like the California Nurses Association.
What do you think debate's relationship to activism is?
Debate's relationship to activism, it is a positive one. It is a good one.
Okay, I guess I'm asking more about the internal link rather than like the value claim.
Yeah, it's a positive correlation. Activism, like, really?
Like, we use debate to figure out what to advocate for. Like,
okay,
we debate about what is a good idea. There's not a one-to-one correlation in that. Sorry.
Which movements are like y'all involved with?
Movements are we individually
Totally
involved in?
irrelevant and divorced from the question of whether
Why
the
is that?
plan's
Why
good.
is that so irrelevant to you?
Because we think debate should be a game in which the affirmative advocates a policy or a plan, and it is judged on its merits.
Okay, but you don't
Our
have
personal
to,
histories are irrelevant.
I'm
for
not
who wins the
asking about your
competitive debate.
personal history. I'm
You
just
are.
wondering. I'm really not, dude. I'm not asking for like a dashboard confessional here. I'm just wondering what your relationship is to these movements. You've made claims in the 180 about subjectivity.
And we're saying our relationship doesn't matter.
Okay, you're just gonna shout out to movements. Interesting. All right. Last question. Do you have a tampon?
No.
Would you like one?
I don't really have a use for it, but sure.
You don't? Why don't you think you have a use for it?
I just don't.
You don't want any?
Like, it's fine. I would not be able to use it.
Okay.
It is sent. Okay, it's sending, so I lied about the send part, but it is in the process of it. It's just one off. Looks like internet leaked out, so. Now it's been sent. I had to reconnect and stuff.
I know everyone has it. I'm good. You good? Alright. I bleed each month to help make humankind a possibility. My womb is home to the divine, a source of life for our species, whether I choose to create or not. But very few times it is seen that way. In older civilizations, blood was considered holy, and some still is, but a majority of people, societies, and communities shun this natural process. Some are more comfortable with the pornification of women, the sexualization of women, the violence and degradation of women than this. They cannot be bothered to express their disgust about all of that, but they will be angered and bothered by this. We menstruate and they see it as dirty, attention-seeking, sick, a burden, as if this process is less natural than breathing, as if it is not a bridge between this universe and the last, as if this process is not love, labor, life, selfless, and strikingly beautiful.
Western patriarchal society sustained through culture and scripting and gender that require the denigration of femininity. The foundational belief is masculine superiority is rooted in the construction of the menstrual body where women can only be understood as biological creatures compared to the transcendent abilities of men. Patterson 13. Western patriarchal discourses have used menstruation to socially define women. These cultural inscriptions mark the female body as the center of reproduction for the continuity of the human race. Also for the proliferation of societal norms and use the dichotomous division of the self and other is incurred in the constructed binary choice categories such as male, female, mind, body, rational, irrational, essential, and essential, which attribute attributes belonging to male, being privileged at the expense of assigned female traits. This grants them the ability to own their power to self as an autonomous subject who can transcend the immanence of the body and enact a change on the world. Women can only be acted upon as her experience and existence is defined in direct relation to the absoluteness of woman is defined through her biology, which confines her to the condition of her body's an essential object as the other woman's positioning as other does not allow for a woman to claim the title to authentic subject. It is difficult for women to transcend the immanence of the body. She must resist being bound by socio-cultural norms. The ritual performances of femininity are created and reproduced through strictly a body legitimate. The body freely escapes a woman's subordination is rooted in the menstrual body, and menstruation is perceived to be the essence of womanhood, which upholds the pioneering perpetuates her objectified and otherwise status. It is because women menstruate that menstruation is the curse that menstrual cycle is constructed negatively due to the institutionalized nature of the gender dichotomy. Now, we really hate talking about blood, but debate loves fixating on death. Menstrual blood is the ugly underside of the apple. In 16. Blood gets infused with the cultural interpretation of blood serves as the indicator of life or blood spilled, blood shared, but it remains a masculine entity. Men show power and sacrifice either through their own blood or by taking another man's blood. Menstrual blood may have a paradoxical association of death and life. They need to silence menstruating women relates to this threat of associating blood and power. The abstinence of the theorizing gender blood presents a significant gap in understanding the meanings of blood. The fusion of the object is death and the menstrual blood as gender power. The blood of power narrative creates in this pure absoluteness sense of the penitent menstrual saying is the feminine fatality of the bloody tampon pushes us to confront the border of our own condition to confront such an object without the run of a bleeding woman to see such horror divorce from its origins brings out for a man a profound sense of dread that you must recoil in horror, not that the 20 running menstrual blood and knowledge of the imminent death may be close for royal menstruation has been framed as a failed reproduction. The moment people see menstrual blood, they remind you of the subconscious need to distance themselves from their own mother's female body symbolizes the pollution, which is the underpinning of the exclusion, the hierarchy, the production of the menstruation cannot be attached to language and will be thrown away. Only in language can we reconnect death with life, rejoin the language, the stain with the alive and menstruating body and transform the meaning of the object of menstrual blood disgusts you precisely because it threatens you. The bleeding woman is your ultimate fear because you cannot control her. Don't run away from the blood, confront it young. And 5. Menstrual blood stands for the danger issuing from within the identity and meaning of menstrual blood is overdetermined. It's semiotics that reminds every subject of her origins inside a female body. We could just live with this fear of failing into the maternal that haunts our self-society tends to conflate the feminine and the maternal. Aggression is misplaced onto women, although women and their mothers are distinct without a way of conceiving the mother that allows us to abject, where we abject all women and women as others become to what is out of control social institution, hegemony, discourse, the male body, bodies, and masculine styles of behavior, normative statuses, discharges women, but psychic security system because the female process has challenged the distinction between inside, outside, soul, and fluid, self-identical, and changing.
The debate community avoids menstruation like the plague, despite it being one of the most common bodily functions experienced by significant portions of debaters and coaches. At the interpersonal level, no one talks about menstruation in debate. Menstruating debaters are forced to conceal their bleeding bodies lest a cis dude sees us carrying a visible tampon to the bathroom. What's more is that cis men do not feel obligated to carry menstrual pogs with them because why would anyone ever expect a cis man like Dan Bannister to care enough to look out for their menstruating debaters or teammates? Hashtag not my uterus, not my problem. At the argument level, this activity has utterly failed its mission of constructing a national health insurance policy despite hundreds of debates over whether or not seeing GoPair would effectively resolve inequality. We have missed the bloody forest for the trees. Menstruation is the topic. Menstruation is health. Menstruation is care. Before you ask, well, why does this mean the plan is a bad idea? Consider why you feel like menstruation isn't responsive to the plan. More importantly, ask yourself why you feel like menstruation is somehow disentangled from the plan itself.
Menstruation undergirds all medical research into social function and healthcare. It is either pathologized to prove feminine inferiority or trivialized to justify ignoring women's basic health needs. Bubble 10. The effort doctors put into establishing the artifice of sexual difference situating menstruation as the object of medical ideology and the culture of it about it with the larger question of women in society. Menstruation becomes an important focus of medicine's function as an agent of larger social forces that keeping women where they belong. Women turn to the medical authorities as physicians rather than rely on their lived experience. Menstruation has been used to prove women's superiority and suitability for everything. When menstrual pain is pathologized to justify women's subordination to trivialize or just as in their head proof of women's instability. Now, despite claims of scientific objectivity and neutrality, the medical system is foundationally designed based on toxic masculine presumptions that violently deny women of color women control over their bodies. NHI is only capable of further marginalization of feminine people to the detriment of their health. Level 10. When begin to question the safety of menstrual products and the social construction of menstruation, the cultivated critical menstrual consciousness that who been provided resistance to the standard medical practice, the promise of scientific objectivity, the academic use of patients, and the norms of the doctor-patient relationship. Women have lacked control over their bodies and their health. The medical system designed to service that primarily by men ignores women's unique body experience of receiving so the unethical use of poor women for colors testing subjects for contraceptive research triggering revolution started in new women's health activists exposing the dangerous consequences of scientific advances for women to collective when women share the deep distrust of the medical establishment of producing a pioneering body of knowledge and empowering women as agents of their own health care. Now remember when we said blood can't be disentangled from the plant, the ass and ambivalence on menstruation should be conceived as a socialization process where women are forced to keep their dirty secret out of the public sphere to avoid the shame of femininity. Patterson 13. menstrual socialization and ambivalence and contradiction and many arguments the process by which we are both negotiate their version of adult femininity, the patriarchal culture, and panoptical male connoisseur reside within the consciousness of the most women. They stand perpetually before his gaze and under his judgment. The girls are so socialized into proper menstrual etiquette, which also the importance of secrecy and concealment thereof, hiding their stigma for the male gaze through the internalization of the male gaze. The woman is self-objectify and self-police their bodies with bloody trance and now to the world that women are not men and cannot exist in the world as men do. Menstruation has been constructed as a feminine secret which should be kept from the public view. The alternative is menstrual crisis. This requires deconstructing the gender binaries inherent to menstruation and healthcare writ large. Only menstrual activism is capable of radically confronting the femcare industry and the institutional forces that pathologize menstruating bodies. Proposal 10. Degenerating menstruation burst the boundaries of the movement at the same time it questions the gender binary that tears at the fabric which we construct hegemonic masculinity and femininity. This is the work of menstrual activism. We need now more than ever commercial prayer sequencing opens with two women greeting. Hey, logical says woman number one. Hey, emotional replies woman number two. The logical represents the so-called thinking woman who has heard doubts about the logic of the suppressing menstruation, but the emotional prevails. Emotion's unspoken argument. Periods hold us back. You're a liberated woman. Act like one. This commercial artificially fit the emotional from the logical. It illustrates what makers appeals that suppressing menstruation know so well. The psychosomatic conscious that are appealing and because they tap into the women's deep emotional reaction to the menstruation. The femcare industry has exploited the lack of the information surrounding the menstruation. The pharma industry is on board. How can we generally choose anything if we are clear on the nature of our options before us? The big pharma encourage women to recently reject the foundational biological process responsible in menstrual activism requires advancing an alternative view without sensualized romanticism or biological determinants. The bigger problem is not menstruation but a tradition that pathologizes women's body as objects in constant need of a commodification of commodified improvement. The industry has co-opted the feminist rhetoric freedom to talk, draws out calls to proceed with caution or for what public health advocates call for the precautionary principle, which places the burden of proof on those who risk the public health. Menstrual activists show us that when we interrogate the relationship between the material body and identity, the culture, and the biological, the social, and the individual, we are better equipped to make profound change. Listen to the menstrual activist, share how the Coochie Lady is a menstrual activist, an African-American woman's health educator, poet, and performer. As long as we continue to be socialized in a way that creates an environment where menstrual bleeding is yucky, then we're in trouble. As we interrogate what we think we know, this will change, not just for menstrual cycle work, but for everything.
Okay, if you get links about us not carrying around tampons, why do we not get I have a second part of the question. Why do we not get to say that you linked to your critique of involving women in the medical system when you read an app about giving women reproductive insurance?
What?
It's like, if you get links about outside of debate stuff, why doesn't that
Why do you
contradict your
think
thing?
that's responsive to our app? Well, why do you think us reading a reproductive justice app, which
Because you read a card that says the medical system is irredeemably screwed for women.
it's in the context of what the app upholds, not in the context of our app.
Okay.
Also, screwed,
sure.
probably not the best language there, champ.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
My mistake. So the card that's like menstruation undergirds all medical research. How does menstruation undergird research for a vaccine to cure pandemic flu?
A lot of different reasons. Menstruation signals failed reproduction. Our argument is that the way that that the very artifice of sexual difference and the way that that bleeds into everything in medical policy, whether that's like in the doctor's office, whether that's in medical textbooks, insurance policies, etc., are all undergirded by menstruation because of what it signifies in terms of
Because of what it
reproduction.
signifies?
Yeah,
Like,
well, not just in terms of what
like
it signifies.
where in the clinical trials process for testing a vaccine to stop the flu is menstruation
Well, because
involved?
menstruation is literally used to establish sexual difference, and that is what undergirds
I see,
all
so-
medical research because
Gotcha.
medical research is gendered, right?
Yeah, the Boble evidence you read about how the medical system is broadly just bad for women says that women of color were used as testing subjects for contraception products. Why does that mean just like going to a primary care doctor is bad?
That evidence is talking about Barbara Seaman's book and what she did with that. I'm not sure what your question is.
Your evidence says that Barbara Seaman exposed the unethical use of poor women of color as testing subjects for contraception. I'm asking about someone going in and just like getting a vaccine at their primary care doctor. Why is that the same thing?
Our argument isn't that maybe that's not the equivalent. This argument is used to point to a specific example of the way that the medical industrial complex is quite bad, but it's also more used to prove sort of the utility of the alternative. There are other parts of the evidence that makes the link argument, but I guess that line is less of like a link argument and more of like an alternative example.
Is it important that women do or don't get medical care, or is your argument that the system can't provide equal care to women ever?
Our argument isn't just that bitches can't go to the doctor. Our argument is about menstrual praxis, and that's a better way of sort of offering healthcare. It's a better way of a better orientation towards healthcare is a way you can frame it.
Okay. Okay. Let's start with
7. It'll be the page. The order will be just the Is anybody not ready? Okay. Good. Disease-caused extinction mutation is a necessary imminent. The survival of humanity will be determined by our healthcare and response to infrastructure. Single payer is critical because unique placements, prevention, and detection are impacts terminally outweigh theirs. Probability times magnitude. Existential threats are infinite, even at low probabilities, because of their irreversibility. That inverts their arguments about how some forms of violence are invisible. The tail end of risk probabilities is systematically dismissed by decision makers due to the incapacity to conceptualize extinction, psychological denial, the availability heuristic, and the erroneous conflation of our impact with overhyped media tropes, not grounded in robust science, especially for pandemics, because analysts inappropriately extrapolate empirics. Morality can never outweigh that impact. Value frameworks, even if subjectively appealing, are not universally held. The harm of killing those who disagree is indistinguishable from their warrant for why a morality or particular individual should outweigh in the first place, which is agency. Extinction is a floor for that value because it lets everyone live to fight another day. It also inverts the warrant for why their impact matters, which is ultimately just avoidable suffering should be prevented, which the affirmative access at a much broader scale, which is the Pamela and Armstrong evidence. However, a util is only appropriate at the higher risk levels, which solves the inevitable critique of our terminal impact framing. Balancing lower threat level solves their offense because it makes justice overriding unless it comes at the expense of species survival, which is the Kirkwood evidence framework. You should only evaluate link arguments that are based on the action of the plan. Prefer it. Logic, thinking, and acting are not opportunity cost fairness. Debating abstractions favors the negative because we set up the one seat to defend our theory's application. It solves their offense. Much of their performativity arguments were just about the discussion of menstruation and the importance of incorporating female blood into discussions about national health insurance and healthcare. That's compatible with an analysis of single payer proven by their own arguments on the affirmative. When they enhance access to reproductive care, does not require foreclosing discussions of this day. Contextualizing their link analysis to a discussion of specific policies and plans is better for this because it incentivizes discussions on policy specificity, which obviously intimately affects the way that feminine socialities play out. The permutation resolves the rest of their offense. It combines altering the ways in which we theorize menstruation and femininity with a political demand. There are myriad net benefits. One, you should center your analysis of femininity on political power arrangements. Otherwise, if you essentialize discussions of gender based on biological aspects and inaccurately construct gender as an analytical dichotomy, our methodology of promoting access for particular groups within political spaces is not better because it provides an infrastructure for individuals to engage and reorient power structures in ways that benefit them. Percent 12 identity not your sword, resolve to coherent whole earth and post-hoc position of the unified label quantity, disparate population, sexual identity, pedagogy, and sexual difference produce normativity, sexual difference, or naturalized alchemy, sexual difference, independent patriarchal conflation of sex and gender. The practices within debate link arguments are not intrinsically tied to a negative to an affirmative ballot. Us turning down Jasmine's often of a tampon certainly is not only because it's not tied to our arguments. Making debate a referendum on aspects of our identity that extend past the debate moves the point of clash and contestation because a dissenters' particular argument. Their research link arguments are wrong. Historical practices of the medical system are not disprove the utility of access. Women are not passive recipients of medicalization. They are active participants within it, and our framework of medical necessity explicitly allows women to negotiate the relationship between themselves and their healthcare providers, which resolves many of their arguments. That's kind of what Dan was getting at in cross-examination when he said that primary care was important. Large by there was a tendency to present women as victims of medicalization. This appropriately perpetuates the very sexist medical ideologies feminists have been trying to challenge women separately as well as medicalization. Women not contributed to medicalization driven by a complex set of reasons. They were active and seeking to validate information. They also question doctors' advice, not a matter of medical conspiracy, but a process in which women have been defense of the best care while also resisting medicalization. Empirical evidence shows medical attack and service and resources easy liberation of medicalization may not be uncontested, it may be actively embraced or resistance, and the affirmative intervention reduces the exploitation of women for their bodies by eliminating the financial the ability of medical researchers to financially coerce women into participating in their projects. Jones and 12 need to show how medical care is financed. The current system is unjust. The United States stands alone in not providing insurance by a single provider for people who are institutionalized upon the bottom unethical studies of poor folks and institutionalized populations are facilitating chiefly in ignorance of often lead them vulnerable to exploitation, harm, the needs of medical scientists, shrink the pool of needy patients. The problem becomes that much less acute if the United States adopted national health insurance. This problem will go a long way to protecting those vulnerable. If all Americans had affordable care, our basic needs would be met, and we would become far less susceptible to this evil practices and by those best medical research. And it can also help resist unethical experimentation against women of color in the medical industrial complex. Washington 7 lies have been powerless and abuse assumptions of medical research. They the worst abuse of Muslim members. Research is more than safe for African Americans. If necessary, we must acknowledge the best see the future while maximizing protections from abuse. African Americans definitely need the medical advantages that only ethical research can be at. The reticence is understandable, but alike Marcus African Americans must welcome research supports affording the gulf the contain the health of blacks and whites. The public foundations health supports for laws to carry real penalties. What change the necessary for the institutional review boards each area being become proposed of equal numbers of scientists and peers in medical ethicists and medical historian bad exceptions or focus that recognize the right to say yes or no is an absolute value instead of coordinated mandatory subject education require that every practicing researcher receive education in the context by medical research. I propose the subject to given the same advantage embrace the single standard ethics researchers follow informed consent structures as restrictive of those in American shores. The affirmative system of medical financing also does not embrace a particular research model. Obviously, not all medical research is founded on the investigation of menstruation and menstrual blood. Their piece of evidence just says that certain femtech industries are exploiting women unethically to create products that are based on that research. However, that research is not an intrinsic part of our advocacy, which is more about the prevention of contagious diseases. Many vaccines are not developed on the basis of menstrual research, and we can obviously permit to do the affirmative and objective forms of research that are conducted unethically. However, here's our offense that resolves their impact better. Our method resolves a better mechanism that challenges the stigmatization of menstrual blood in society writ large, not just in debate. ACE point single payer bills organizing capacity gives activists the experience engaging with the state, which reduces their probability that they can best repeat players in future attempts to contest their exclusion in political terms. B point positive goals instead of negative opposition to the state are key. Trump feeds on negation because it allows them to set the agenda of patriarchy and nationalism in itself are just the oppositional reactions to limit the power of incumbent institutions, which is why positive organizing is critical. That's the Dan Brown evidence. Single payer ensures equity of access to care for women, which is a worthwhile goal. Advocate 16 policy changes, overcoming limited institutions that are associated with old policy structures. The capital policy are institutions of vested interests that reinforce gender, class, and race distinctions. Health to maintain the status quo insurance rates. A great role for the private sector. The historic market orientation of the U.S. A policy made single payer out of the question in the employer-based model. Wise where beneficiaries only by marriage. Women are more likely to be relegated to poorly financed, low quality healthcare. When governing bodies seek to defend the policy status quo, they also hold up a gendered hierarchy of healthcare privilege by opposing a single payer. The most gender equitable financing option was left off the negotiating table, the largest possible risk pool, and ensures equity for the services offered for women. Additionally, entrenched and commodified healthcare is a barrier to reversing other gender norms, such as the opposition in society to discussing menstrual cycles in broader society as well. Single payer is a leverage point for challenging broader masculine structures because there are many financial aspects that are associated with the private insurance system that are actively built in order to disempower women and prevent them from engaging in medical institutions, to change the narratives that operate surrounding their bodies, and to change the way that is excluded from political discussions. Now, Sure 17, the healthcare system has been overwhelmingly negative. One of the first organizations to demand a single payer capitalism is incapable of providing a care cost benefit analysis rates out the benefits of public health to dismantle gender barriers to a single payer scale. Women are disadvantaged in employer-based coverage meant to attract workers. The companies with a majority female workers tend to offer less generous coverage. Jobs paying a minimum which are most often occupied by women of color. Trans women face even higher levels of poverty, saddled with high out-of-pocket costs. Employer-based gatekeeping engineers the impossible bind by removing power over health from employers and spouses and replacing unequal tiers of one unified pool. We could fund our system of progressive taxes, guarantee care, and Medicare for all of the best guarantees of abortion and gender-affirming care would force American society to address care disparities women face. Additionally, the introduction of a single payer challenges many other gender norms in society. For example, many of their own pieces of evidence discuss the way that women are disproportionately inducted into the healthcare workforce as part of the exploitation of their bodies for medical research. An example of how that would play out in a pandemic is that women are often on the front lines of medical care. When a pandemic gets out of hand, women are often the first responders, and they're forced to be exposed disproportionately to the pandemic when it breaks out. And when there's not an adequate healthcare infrastructure, women are often forced to stay home and take care of their children by the gender structures of society that result in the unequitable distribution of power. Single payer prevents that by creating universal access to a medical system that has the expertise to contest that in a more systematic and rigorous fashion, and by preventing those outbreaks from breaking out in the first place, which solves a disproportionate form of violence. Acting to accomplish these goals within the state is a useful, pragmatic tool that can be used to accomplish contingent feminist gains. Streetmaker and 17 applying competition would criticize making the legitimacy of gender activity equality activities dependent on whether they contribute to other aims. These interpretations run the risk of overlooking complexity organizations now monolithic across multiple organizational logics. This is simultaneously even when contradictory. A simulation can work the other way around. Managers can be used for gender equality, institutional complexity, community, and institutional work into a significant area, even when the commitment of the leadership really serves as self-service to increase the legitimacy. The politically polarized may have a little in common with the feminist agenda. However, translated to the political and organizational commitment can reshape this issue. Legal changes are particularly important for altering social norms. Then, 14 access access is hindered by the legal framework. The legal context is dominated by the reference of doctor's interest and conscience clauses restrict access to the courts of relevant doctor's interest, framing the issue in terms of physician's right or deep politicized one way of moving beyond the rule of medical expertise is to recognize that the law is not powerless with regard to medical expertise. The juridical has the power to constrain the practice of experts and hold them to account for their actions. Law has to operate to manipulate and control expert knowledge. A better legal approach to sterilization would put a primary emphasis on allowing patients to carry out their interest waiting periods and requirements that women receive written information are likely still necessary to ensure that patients have the ability to carry out their wishes. Such measures may be critical for those who are at risk of coerced sterilization. Instead of abolishing safeguards, guidelines should place a strong presumption in favor of carrying out a patient's desire. That's good, right? Yeah.
Ready?
Yep.
You make this argument that says single-payer movements can lead to changing these kind of social norms. Which card do you think you read that is in the context of menstrual activism?
Well, so the piece of short evidence is referring to a movement called Our Bodies, Ourselves, which is a movement that is based on sort of there was a group of women that assembled in college in 1969, and they ended up publishing this sort of pamphlet that listed a series of demands that included a discussion of sexuality that was completely way farther along, ahead of its time. There were many norms that were, received considerable flack. Over time, this movement. Sorry.
I'm gonna move on. I kind of get your point. The next question
they've
I
endorsed
have-
a single payer, but sure is one example.
Sure. Next question. The negotiation part between the doctor and the patient. Which card argument anywhere assumes or solves for a shitty doctor, a doctor who doesn't, or a doctor who'd be coercive?
Well, that's kind of our point. So the Ballard evidence says that your account of how medical coercion works is incredibly reductive and denies the agency of women in those interactions. When you ask Danning cross-ex, I just want to make clear, and I said this in that interaction, and I'm going to say it again, the doctor does not have veto power over what medically necessary care is.
Yeah, but they have the ability to persuade and change minds, correct?
Yeah, and the notion that women's opinions are going to be overdetermined by what their doctor says denies those women's agencies in those interactions, which is bad. Why does it deny their agency?
Yeah.
Our Ballard evidence describes it says that, the medical ideologies that have been sexist in the past have been resisted by women in medical interactions empirically.
So,
it's just like the paternalistic model of medical interactions just does not describe physician-patient interactions
it
anymore.
indicates that there's some patient pressure on doctors, etc. So I guess in the world of the dialogic process that y'all prop up, that means that in a world of for example, if someone wanted, a different form of menstrual care, they would have to do the labor with their doctor to convince their doctor to cover that or to prescribe them that?
The doctor does not need to co-sign the patient's demand for care.
That's literally how prescriptions work, though. You have to get a doctor's approval.
Medically necessary care is a negotiated process in the sense that
Yes.
there's a dialogue between the patient and the doctor.
But that
the
labor
doctor,
still has to
like
be
I
done.
said, the doctor does not get veto power.
People
Also, there are legal remedies to
My
everything that you've just
next
described, which is the point of the Denver
is,
card.
You said a phrase that I'm really curious and I'd like you to expand upon. What do you mean when you say female blood?
What do I mean when I say female blood? Well,
Why do you
There-
put that
well,
connection?
There is okay. So one, it's obviously
there's
not all blood.
there's a
is
difference
female.
between sex and gender. Obviously, not all blood.
There
is
is
female.
such thing as female blood in the same way that there is also such thing as male blood. It's females can possess blood or own their blood, etc.
Oh, sorry, that.
So, my sister made me cook her a list of board games for my birthday, which was kind of nice. She just told me she emailed me a complete vintage of Doom. So if I shittily put together one, won't be necessary. And I'm very excited about that. If you're ever back in Atlanta, we gotta run. Which you should come back to it.
I really would like to. I'd say it's
yeah,
probably going to be late April.
Yeah, I understand that starting the new job means limited flex.
Well, and just we're supposed to be to complete on this.
Oh yeah, you said April 21st was the.
So after that, I mean, there'll be a Q&A after that, so obviously
There'll be
talks
bugs,
about
yeah,
it, we'll have to finish it, but I'll be a little bit less totally brutalized by a deadline right now.
Yeah.
Here's my life.
That's your take of those.
So it's gonna be a busy month, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's good. Did you do your coding on the Mac? Yeah, I was gonna say, I figured people would have DIY Unix boxes, but
No one's that cool.
no one rolls that hard anymore.
I mean, plenty of people do.
You could probably unplug my phone.
As far as like out of the box functional things that they can do as work computers, these are definitely
Yeah, and that's obviously good.
some environment to go mix it there.
Yeah.
Technically, we can just like partition that makes a virtual machine. Then you're actually working on the same environment.
Then you're all the way in, but it's
Like I have that. You're actually like virtual box. There, that's the VM.
just looks so X-ray.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what you're saying is you hacked the election for the Russians. So what you've told me is you're doing computer stuff for a firm in Texas. You've long held a deep sympathy toward the Russians.
No.
Coding dojo. Is that your like learning program? Midterms. How's Jordy?
It's good. He's boarded right now, but when I go back tomorrow, the place has some good stuff. I'm just gonna go straight there. Like an hour and then go to work.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. Should go easily.
Sadly missing the Argos pickup time tomorrow.
Oh, so you have to
Yeah, I kinda wanna try to get somebody to pick them up, but they'd have to like pay.
yeah, okay.
So I might try to like call them tomorrow and prepay.
No problem.
4:55.
4:55. Orders of criticism, 35, second issue overview, overview of concern, and the logo.
Are you gonna be skipping stuff or just straight down?
No.
Do you have to pick up where I decided to stop?
You said yeah.
Alright, you two good? Great.
Just a sec, sorry.
Good? Okay.
The 2AC has already lost its debate because they've conceded our theory of language and objection. Patriarchy and the gender dichotomy exist through the cultural inscriptions of gender, of masculinity and femininity, which are derived from the menstrual body. Women are socially defined through their biological capacities as reproducers for the human race because we bleed and men do not. The meaning of menstrual blood is overdetermined through language. All menstruators are objective because of what that blood represents, which is a lack of control over death. This is why it's so troubling for masculinity to be confronted with menstruation. It's icky, it's gross, and it signals the impossibility of overcoming the bodily realm, which is associated with death and femininity in favor of masculine transcendence. Menstrual blood is the condition of possibility for life, death, destruction, love, desire, threat, action, gender, healthcare, institutions, and politics. This blood is the backdrop of your ugliest fears, your most authentic desires, and your relationship to health. These entanglements matter because it disrupts the app's desire for an individual, autonomous subject who exists outside of the body. Menstruation is the only blood that is not born from violence, yet it's the one that disgusts you the most. These concessions matter not just for technical purposes, but also because they prove a broader argument about masculine suppression and distancing from the objection of menstrual blood. Now, at the top, impact framing. The framework I'll make down in a second will apply here, so just hang tight. But you should prioritize systemic violence and ethical subject formation. The only benefit of debates that we learn about issues that remain at the margins of public discourse, become effective advocates for the best ideas. Our links prove that the app sustains violent systems of masculinity that sustain gender violence, which is never acceptable, even under consequentialism. Our Patterson evidence says that the continued abjection and fear of menstrual blood leads to violent forms of socialization for menstruators in debate, where we have to both self-objectify and self-police our bodies and behavior just so cis men are not made uncomfortable, leads to internalized misogyny and the general discomfort of existing in debate as women, which matters so much more than the residual impact of merely imagining this single pair happens. In any claim the app can redress suffering is a link. They center the masculine public sphere as uniquely capable of confronting pain and suffering, which denigrates the feminine concern as failed universality. Their aesthetic sexism is a reason to reject the app entirely, vote negative. Stricken 14. This obligation feels really depends on the feel masturbating in the first place to dominate the which needs to transformation of pain and violence, while mind political action and male aesthetic subject is able to sympathize with the body of the patient derived from alternate ancient feeling pain of others and translate pain sympathy over tragic longevity, masculine compassion, soul institution, diagnosed female master pain, and capable of living and causing social change. Female bodies engaged in contemplations of bodies, female bodies in danger of being overwhelmed by its own drive and sympathy. She can feel the pain of others when it should never master live in the way masculinity will female bodies feel universality for psychological future foundation of pain, sympathy, and politics ensure the female bodies are prevented from access to political on these same terms that they are granted. Inclusion, the fear of disease is a fear of filthy, polluted destitution born out of their objection of menstruation. The scenario of the one he sees a myth built on denigrating any association with femininity. This is a debate, but they can't help be afraid of their inevitable loss of control over death, which is signified by menstruation. Now, the framework portion, counter-interpretation of one he sees an object of research of all the neck should be to disprove the various meanings of that object. They should be responsible for the way their knowledge is constructed and used because it produces the best model for activism and ethics in the context of the topic, which unique notation of benefit to our interpretation. They get to make the research and the reasons why it's good, which resolves any fairness concerns. But procedural fairness is a myth of access. Menstrual fairness comes first, young and fun. The affirmation of life when coming across normalization opportunities and open women trying to form this answer, which should be by forces separate men as must. So, pressing some social implication of menstruation, intervention, and dismantling concept women must those tools, replace smoke institution of your current qualities of the standard body that does not menstruate subject qualities, sameness, and really discriminate, dismantling menstruating women, and threatens us with embarrassment and shame. All links implicate the effects of the plan, which should be sufficient for plan focus and policy details. Plan focus is a form of abjection because it aims to control the expression of femininity in debate. When confronted with menstruation and a woman telling them that this is in fact about the plan, the response is to deny that lived reality as if they somehow know more about menstrual blood than someone who bleeds. The impact of this form of objection is masculine transcendence and paternalism, where men are granted the ability to transcend the body, the immanence in their bodies, and act change on the world via the wand we call fiat, but women are confined to our immanence and can only be acted upon as object, which is our Patterson evidence. Next, remember those arguments I made about language in the overview. They apply lie here because their claim that menstruation isn't about the plan isn't true. Their response is overdetermined by the meaning of menstruation and what it symbolizes. Our young evidence says that when men are confronted with menstrual blood and recoil in anxiety and disgust, it's only because we've internally reminded them of their entanglement with other bleeding bodies, which denies them sovereign control. If you win, the act produces masculine scholarship you cannot ethically justify voting for because you are all educators and not policymakers. It's uniquely true for debate, where judges are socialized to act like disembodied robots without considering how gender affects communication. The interpretation of debaters' arguments is proven by the app overdetermined the masculine production of academic evidence at the expense of feminized poetics, i.e. the 2AC not making a reference to the poetic aspect of the 1NC. Break this cycle, vote next to stay in debate with us. McDonald's 7, only to revisit control by losing control and acting complete demonstration. Not be talked about, we breaches habits, how we do so you think strategies like omission, the cultural and mention, not something we should speak of openly and control to, and rolling the forward bodies, losing serious quality attention, female life, and color blood, to avoid staining the entire masculine rational order, remain seemingly intact. Their assertion about our reproductive justice that doesn't make any sense because their app is about reproductive justice, not single pair disease securitization. Good. They say perm do both. I'll do the link work here. The bodily transcendence link argument has already been done above when answering plain focus. The next link is menstrual care. Their desire to promote life and health is not neutral. They rely upon an oppositional logic which constrains blood to the realm of death and decay. Despite claims to have comprehensive coverage, the actors that cover the most common health need that most women experience, which is menstruation, tampons, pads, etc., are covered by the app and remain subject to pink taxes, which means the app uniquely disadvantages women with any healthcare system. Not only must women bear the financial burden, but also the health and environmental costs. All this is justified because of the exclusion of menstruation, so naturalizes the association of women's bleeding bodies with pollution and disgust. Denigration of menstruation as failed reproduction also legitimates physical and psychological violence against women as failed reproduction, which is our false evidence. Next is objection. Fear of death is intrinsic to the masculine desire to regulate embodied feminity's revelation of the loss of control. The app operationalizes the institutions and discourses of the normative masculine ideal in which the state's paternal drive to manage and regulate the lives of its citizens, and for the name of disease reveals menstrual blood as the stain on the public sphere. This stain disrupts the masculine desire for control in the social contract, which suppresses women to the private bodily realm. This menstrual blood marks the impossibility of constraining the feminine body and its fluids, which then in turn signals the impossibility of constraining our vulnerability to death. Blood in women become objected and denigrated as threats to the app's psychic security system and must be shown, which is our youngest and false evidence. Next is medical authority, medical research, and institutions function through the social construction of menstruation, from textbooks, med school, to doctor's office, insurance companies. Every aspect of healthcare is bound up with menstruation because it determines how women are perceived, what drugs are prescribed, and whether or not their health concerns are even listened to. By virtue of bleeding every month, doctors are able to write off the health needs of menstruators because they believe it's all in our head. That's that time of the month. This is why it takes years for women to get diagnosed with endometriosis, a debilitating condition, but doctors don't believe them. They just tell women it's PMS or STDs. The impact is misdiagnosis and continued pain, which is warranted by our vulva evidence. Next is our femcare link. If they cover contraceptives, they massively link to our femcare industry argument. Our third piece of vulva evidence says the naive promotion of contraceptives is not benign, but bolsters the femcare industry and the abject and big pharma, who are parasitic on menstruators. Pill makers exploit the abjection of menstruation and prey on women's anxiety about periods to make us believe that we need to take a bunch of pills to suppress a natural bodily process. Our evidence gives the examples of a season-E commercial that advertises birth control on the basis that women should want their period because they hold us back, and we need to be logical, liberated women who don't believe. This means the app's increase of contraceptive coverage only strengthens the femcare industry and increases the pathologization of menstruation. That the permutation can't resolve any of the link arguments. We've impacted on their form of healthcare and their model of deliberation. There are a couple dissets of the permutation. One is pathologization. The permutation denigrates the fleshy embodied politics and seeks to rectify our failure through the incorporation of the masculine ideal of politics, hence our K of the public and private made above. Next is gaslighting. The permutation mirrors the doctor-patient relationship that says our concerns are just in our heads. Don't worry, doctors don't have the ability to veto those things when they do it all the time. And that a combination of our advocacies is mutually agreeable despite us explicitly saying that they're not. They say it's essentialist. This couldn't be more wrong. The entire premise of our criticism is that the gender binary is bad and is rooted in the construction of the menstrual bodies, where Patterson evidence is gender is socially constructed, but because some of us happen to bleed, well, women becomes an essentialized category. We're an impact term to this. All of our evidence is that objection is what causes essentialism because society conflates, because society and the app conflate the maternal with the feminine. The alternative results is anyway because that's what menstrual practices in the context. And next, they say the plan is good for women. Group their Jones and Power evidence that could not be less responsive to our criticism. Our entire argument is about the pathology of menstruation operates at the linguistic level. It doesn't matter if the app covers health insurance or that they allow women to negotiate with their doctors because menstrual blood is still signified as filth and decay. No matter how much they reduce premiums, menstruators in debate still have to hide our tampons and walk into the bathroom. They have to conceal our bleeding bodies from Kentucky. That's our Patterson vulva evidence that answers their valid evidence about women's resistance to medicalization. Our argument isn't that women don't have agency, but that the labor required to have that agency and to have that recognized in the context of menstruation, which their evidence is not responsive to. Next, they can't access as Washington evidence, because it's not about gender, but it's also in the context of establishing institutional review boards. Read the evidence. The plan doesn't do that. They can't access this. Row 6.
Everyone good? How does menstrual praxis change the way that menstruation is discussed?
Well, I think this debate is a pretty good indicator of that. Our entire argument is that we have to de-gender menstruation. We have to sort of re-signify what it means. Rather than the status quo, it's signified as being filth, decay, disgusting, icky, gross. We don't want to talk about it. Our argument is that we should talk about menstruation in debate because it's something that over half of the community experiences.
What about broader political context? So I get that you have an argument for why you increase the discussion of menstruation in debate.
Yeah.
Do you have an argument for those discussions influencing the way that broader political discussions outside of this space
absolutely.
discuss
So
those
the
issues?
alt debate will be more than 1 hour, but to give you a preview, there are a lot of examples of this happening with a bunch of different groups. So even in the 1 and C, the Barbara Steven book that we kind of talked about, is an example of menstrual praxis. Her book inspired over 20 million people to take advantage of their own forms of like agency in healthcare rather than listening to just shitty cis-dude doctors. And it reached over 20 million people and actually had the capacity to influence medical practices.
Influence medical practices, and by medical practices you mean the individual's interactions with medicine and not like interaction with the medical industrial complex?
Both.
So,
It's both.
So how did it affect the latter?
Yeah, so the example is in the context of contraceptive testing on women of color and the violations of that. Her book is what exposed that. Her book is what kind of got the ball rolling. Her book is what garnered the public media attention that even spurred any sort of other legal action.
So just exposure and attention are good as a prerequisite to changing
That is
laws?
one aspect of it, but like I said, the alternative will be more discussed in the 1 hour, which Derek will provide some more examples.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
That is one.
So, given that, is what kinds of interactions can use the discourses promoted by sort of menstrual praxis to influence the way that so like you made this example about the femtech industry, imposing technology, right, and sort of peddling this false narrative that there's a particular set of treatments that needs to be taken through the promotion of discussive menstruation. So is your argument that you would change the ability of the femtech industry to do that, or would you empower women to refuse the narrative?
It's femcare, and it's kind of like a little bit of both. Our argument in terms of menstrual praxis is that the way that it operates in relationship to the femcare industry is like on 2 different levels. On the one hand, it sort of like criticizes the assumed like benevolence or the assumed like objective like good nature of femcare and of like birth control, contraceptives, all those sort of things. But then additionally, it says that those things can be good potentially, but they have to be framed in a way, and they have to be sort of like I guess made transparent in terms of the health effects. That's what our goal is.
Under what conditions should people have access to those things?
In the context of like the alternative, Derek, like I said, it's going to make some of these arguments a little bit more clear. I didn't talk about these things, so like I'm confused by your question because it's just something important to you.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna take a little bit of prep.
Okay, 7.
Yeah, I have everything. Just if I have time.
We're going for 60 wins, we're going for 60 losses.
Somebody's gonna drive this thing.
Disaster.
Just a minute. So we're at 6.
I am catching.
Sorry, like
We're at 6 minutes.
6. Yeah. Start a debate. It's all like 2 minutes. In fairness, we're 25% more points.
So, Nick, what makes this Emory team so revolutionary?
No, they invented the counterpoint.
Oh, okay.
In 1977.
Jack and Tankers?
Just curious.
Yeah,
I guess
Jack, now Steven knows about Jack and Tankers. Of
course we do.
You know.
Things have been sent. So there's going to be the alt explanation, and then I'm going to pick up right where Jazzy left off.
I like the pre-1 and R and the second debate I've judged you judge philosophy question. That's interesting timing.
Everybody got what they need?
What'd you say about the order just picking up?
Alt picking up right where Jazzy left off. Cool. Anyone not ready?
I'll explain the alternative. The alternative is performing menstrual praxis with Western patriarchal discourse right gender onto women's bodies for a violent subjugation based foundationally on their menstruation. Their bloody bodies are marked as leaky, abject, frightening, and thus disposable objects to be acted upon. Performance of menstrual activism is crucial, but when it's a degendered menstruation by revealing what is always concealed, disrupting hegemonic masculinity that constructs gender and other social categories that are the root cause of abjection or bloody speech provokes affective, visceral disgust at the menstrual body while deconstructing and interrogating the relationship between the body and identity. It requires deconstructing the gender categories that pathologize menstruation and intervening at the local level. It rejects the naive promotion of insurance and the government's control over menstrual care. Now, here's a couple of examples that Jazzy alluded to. The first one is broad lines of organization activists sought to break down the shame and stigma surrounding menstruation through performances and poetry. They created a day, May 28th, International Menstrual Day, to connect with other menstruators globally to provide support and information. The second one is artists. The feminist artists hosted a bleed-in where they taped themselves in a bathroom surrounded by used menstrual products, discussing their experiences. They directly confronted a powerful social taboo and used humor to get audiences to listen to them. Now, you and Card. You should not be seduced by their single payers. Good for women. Pivot our link arguments to prove this gestures tokenistic bullshit. Their random shout out to our bodies, ourselves, despite having no relationship to these movements. This is a strategic masculinity diss at our argument is that they don't have the right to the solidarity because they use the labor of those movements to weaponize them against other feminist scholars and activists. This is why their link turn is a fundamental double turn with the thesis of the affirmative. Think back to the 1AC where they said infringing on individual autonomy is justified here, and all of their util claims. Those are antithetical to the mission of organizations like Our Bodies Ourselves. You should refuse this move towards strategic masculinity, or else they will always put the demands of women of color on the back burner and choose to prioritize their health concerns only when it's convenient for them, which leads to a gendered serial policy failure. And the cherry on top here is that their own evidence quotes Our Bodies Ourselves saying healthcare cannot be adequate as long as it's conceived as is insurance. That is a linked argument for us. They've read a link to the plan. Now, they say the plan single payer is good for women. This couldn't be less responsive to our criticism. This is why our linguistic and performative intervention and debates necessary to break down what menstrual blood symbolizes. In order for any insurance mechanism to be effective, menstrual praxis has to come first. Wrinkle and Wharf 14. Internalized stigma that makes them strengthening of their agency a challenging test, and once women and girls feel comfortable speaking about menstruation, their experiences and preferences can greatly enhance the impact. The provision of services, facilities, and materials must be grounded in the local context, act according to personal preferences based on culture and attitudes, which can only be elicited from the women and the girls who are going to use the services. Their first piece of evidence, that first line takes out the entirety of their argument about the culture shift changing, because the first line indicates that it takes decades for policy changes to actually take effect because of the way they have been ingrained. Means the app would not be able to solve their true evidence. I've already answered that above. The next card. Their next card is about universities having gender equality classes. The app certainly doesn't do this thing, and it's also about Australia. It's kind of weird for them. Their last piece of evidence, the Depot evidence, is not about the affirmative because they do not restrain doctors' power. It ignores the kind of power relations that happens. Jazzy did that work. Now, our impact outweighs on probability and magnitude. Risk assessment is epistemologically biased towards white male elites who discount the severity of everyday localized violence and destroying marginalized communities. Vercheck in 96. The language of risk assessment serves only to the mask, and not eliminate social consideration. The subjective decision to prefer white men as subjects for epidemiology studies as risk assessment that focus on cancer death, but not to say the risk of birth defects is yet another example of how policymakers' subjective decision of what to look for influence what is ultimately seen, whose experience, whose judgment, whose information. Questions involving the risk of death and disease should not even aspire to value neutrality. Policymakers should look to perspectives of society's most vulnerable national survey measured risk perceptions. White males perceive risk as much more acceptable. Without exception, the researchers conducted regression analysis after all correction, gender, race, and white male status remain highly significant. The risk assessors of politicians, the majority of whom are white men, have crafted a system of protection device towards their understanding that women and people of color have less power and control. White men are more complacent about public risk because they control the institution, they dominate the sciences. Individuals harbor fears of catastrophe, bombings, and the disasters in which high concentration of people are killed prove disturbing. Local threats produce high concentrations of localized harm that appear catastrophic to those involved. The catastrophic potential of a risk should influence risk assessment in only minimal ways. Considering public fear of catastrophes will rationally lead to policymakers to battle dramatic but statistically less threatening hazards while accepting more harmful but mundane hazards. Localized hazards do not simply harm individuals, they erode community. Take note of this communal harm is to underestimate severely the true risk involved because localized hazards tend to be unevenly distributed on the basis of race and income, resulting in mass injury takes on profound moral character. The risk means more than expected a number of fatalities. Policy must consider both logic and local experience in addressing a problem. The science of risk assessment must include the voices of those typically excluded from its practice. What? I've already answered all those. Okay, can I read that equality card then?
Sure.
Cool.
Answers a stringer card.
Yeah, this all answers their arguments because it's about gender equality. The idea of gender equality is still masculine because you use the experience of men as a metric for women's equality. And 6. The gender equality idea focuses attention solely on gender relations and the women's equality with men. The ideal makes men's lives and experiences the standard against which society measures equality and ignores the breadth and depth of women's subordination defined by their experience and reinforces the male bias that's already inherent in many social institutions. The ideal fails to recognize that women are subject to social cleavages, ethnicity, race, class, and nationality, limiting the many social boundaries that the goal of promoting the equal worth of every individual implies. The ideal does not recognize that some of the same social systems that result in women's diversity also result in the myriad of different ways in which the society subordinates women.
Okay, 6.
Basically react like a trucker does when someone has a validated answer. Just like this really like Russell sighing. Where's the card that trucker could? I can only judge through the quarters. My clothes are worse than they used to be, basically because I'm out of it for a while. I get worse at all this shorthand, which helps a lot. Yeah, no, I float a lot differently than like a debater. I had like very few arguments per page just to make sure I was doing everything. There's also paper debate, so I actually had I would just take a different 2009, 2004. Turner's always acts like he and I overlap debating. I was like, no, dude, you were gone by the time we showed up. That's my least favorite imitation argument. What is this? This is just like a cold letter. So Rick goes in and he's like, you folks are pretty nice I think you're right for your last 15.
Yeah, I know.
It's just like, don't come at me with this. I was like, well, yeah, the native went for a terrible process management with no evidence about the app, so I would protect that. Which is why you're owed your last 15. He see what to say about that.
Actually, we're gonna 254. I sent it. It is the K page. I will clearly talk about what I am extending.
Do you have a place where you're starting?
Yeah, I'm gonna, like the 2NC overview, I'm gonna say a thing about that. Then I'm gonna start on framework and talk about the perm. Yeah.
I do have the overview on a separate sheet, so when you transition.
Yeah.
So
Can everybody else stand?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, real good?
If we win framework, we win because impact calculus, the impact of existential threats is infinite. It cannot be compared to other harms because extinction forecloses the possibility of any possible redemptive action in the future. Arguments to the contrary reflect hubris and psychological denial. There's no real answer. The fact that other things are bad does not mean they outweigh extinction. The reason anti-women, anti-female, and anti-menstruating violence is so pernicious is that it causes preventable death and suffering. And global disease would exponentially spike such death and suffering. That's the Pamela and Armstrong evidence. We don't link to the Virtue card from the 1 hour. Util should only be invoked at the highest end of risk levels. Other preventable injustices can and should be corrected. And black and brown folks in the global south would be most affected by a global disease outbreak, which answers their argument about local violence. The first argument on the overview is that we conceded their theory of language and objection. That is wrong. There is no empirical data or word from their evidence. Their evidence is written by calm people asserting these ontological claims about the world and how violence against women is conducted without any empirical data. We also did answer all of our evidence says that women's lives can be contextually and materially improved through legal changes, and a single pair which answers their argument contextually, especially in the context of the affirmative. The critique proper framework first. Links have to disprove the plain text and we get to weigh the apps impacts. One is clash. Debates about assumptions and methodology are infinitely regressive. The app cannot be prepared to defend every possible component of the 1AC's research object clash. Always gets key to make it's key to operationalize all the values of debate. They dangerously subvert clash by making personal attacks an extracurricular fair game, which destroys the purpose of the activity, which is the clash of on and a greater point of stasis. Second is logic. Thinking and acting are not opportunity cost. Logic is key to make any good decisions, which also reads the permutation. They say prioritize specific violence. Sure, we can prioritize that by discussing such violence and how it relates to whether single payer is good or bad. They say the masculine public sphere argument, the distinction between the public and private sphere is incorrect. Rejecting the notion of a private sphere is bad. Its conceptual equipment can motivate many contextual gains, including in reproductive health. That's put him 17. A problem is private or political can and must be seen as both a distinction is orthogonal to the distinction between approaching situationally and structurally the political problems of improving life of the war to be approached both situationally and structurally. The seeing as problem, seeing the problem as politics is more general than seeing it as political. The political is only one sphere. The public attempts to attention to the context sphere to fragmentation of all problems prompted by this. Some deny the distinction. They argue the latter dichotomy to keep the women in their place, but there are different ways that to reject the dichotomy. Feminists deal with the legality of abortions by pointing out that the promise or private promise of regulation of violence of political right related public prisons must be also be solved to make the public and private choice not have children denying the existence of the private sphere be self-defeating. The next argument is that the fear of disease is the fear of objection. We're only scared of contagious diseases. The 1AC does not say we're scared of menstruation. It says we're scared of pandemics. They have no evidence that all disease fear is based on menstruation because that's obviously an unfounded claim. They say counter-interpretation object of research. That's unlimiting. Everything is contained in the object of our research, and there's infinite things you could critique, which makes being affirmative impossible. Weighing research is not an argument. How do we prove we researched in a particular way and weigh that against your research? How would the judges evaluate that? There's no objective metric, which means that plan good or bad is the best way. It's the best way to evaluate that. Procedural fairness is an intrinsic good. Yes, there are barriers to women succeeding, obviously, but there's a bunch of barriers to people succeeding in debate anyway, including speech time, speed, coaching, and money. All of those things are inevitable, and they're not reasons to give up plan-based debate. And a slew of successful female debaters disproves their argument about it affecting the possibility to engage in or have plan-based debates. Yes, you're not policymakers, but it is much more educational to engage in our type of discussion because the Dan Brown evidence says the debates about single payer can spill up to broader discussions can spill to broader discussions that challenge systems in power. This is especially important when we have people in power who are not scared to talk about blood when Trump makes sexist comments about Rosie O'Donnell, etc. All of our arguments about political mobilization are linked terms because the people in power are not afraid of the menstrual taboo. They don't have a debate keyword for their argument. They are totally right that we should think about carrying tampons for our teammates and we should talk more about the stigma in this debate, but they could have talked about that to us outside the debate with us and we would have totally been receptive, which proves this argument is mostly bad faith. Don't let them convince you that the choice is between you're a sexist and vote negative. This is emotional blackmail. You can recognize that there are problems in debate, but they are not because we read a plan and they are not because of topical debate. Vote F because fairness and clash can be good at the same time as recognizing that the community needs to be better at caring for menstruating bodies. Now, permutation, do the affirmative and engage in menstrual practice that affirms change in the community standards of menstruation and in menstruation broadly. The examples of movements that one in our sites are obviously things that we do not trade off with. There's a bunch of benefits to the permutation. One is the single payer is good. The UCO evidence that the employer insurance makes women work in low-wage jobs, which is terrible for their ability to be liberated. All of their arguments assume women who are not constrained in agential capacity, but they certainly are because of the because of their being forced into the private health insurance market. The sure evidence is that single payer creates a rallying point for broader movements around against patriarchy and compares that with the female workforce, given the female workforce, which gives women poor coverage, especially true for trans people and women, which causes high out-of-pocket costs and it locks in structural poverty. Second is the Dendo evidence, which says that legal changes are good for women broadly. They affect socialization, which link turns their argument positive. Legal changes empower female agency and allow them to resist structures of domination that lock in their exclusion. We're not tokenizing anyone. Their argument is ethical localism because it would say that cis men like Anthony and I should never talk about women's issues or policies that could affect them. It is obviously good for us to research those things and have debates about them because they bring them to light and illuminate them in a meaningful way. We're not taking credit for those movements or their emotional labor. We're saying that they were good and they called for a fucking single payer, which is the same thing we're doing. The sure evidence and the culture shift argument. Fiat solves the immediacy argument. The equality bad card is there's no link because women's conditions should be bettered without making them a reference to men, which is an argument that they shouldn't have to pay egregious amounts for private health care. The permutation of the argument about medical necessity is wrong. Medical necessity covers tampons and menstrual care. That's Joan 17. I made up the frame menstrual equality I've used to describe the notion of what it means to consider the ability to manage menstruation, the context of full-time civic participation, and fairness to how women are treated in society because they menstruate. They should have to pay more, including needing a medically necessary item. The reproductive link argument, not everything is tied to reproduction. Their link evidence is dangerously circumscribed to things like contraceptive testing. Does not say all medical research is fundamentally dependent on women and not determine all of healthcare. If their argument was true, women would have never gotten successful health interventions, and the fact that they have proves that the medical system is not totally skewed against them. The argument about covering contraception, it's medically necessary, which means that people would have a dialogic relationship with their doctor to determine whether or not they want contraception to be covered, which solves the negative societal pressures. But getting contraception is good because it gives people sexual liberation. They should have the choice to do so. All of the Ballard evidence answers their beefs with medical necessary and doctor-patient negotiation because it says it's empowering and resolves the rest of their arguments. We don't link to the pathology idea or gaslighting. We are not pathologizing or gaslighting with your arguments. We think they're important. We don't think there's a debate keyword. We do think that clash and fairness are important, that your arguments should engage the plan.
Yep. Tea cream and
good burger there.
Grilled cheese, motherfucker.
I'm mostly following the winning order. I have faith in you all.
Kind.
Yeah, probably. Faith in some of y'all.
kind, foolhardy. One of the above.
There's everyone.
Yep.
Great. When you sketch out your RG, ask yourself if it is a challenge toward the role in menstrual blood and the mechanics of toxic masculinity, medicine policy, and the debate community. Even if they win the app as a good idea, the abstract does nothing to challenge the norms of masculinity in society and debate, then that means it cannot be adopted. They have lost this debate. They have no evidence about menstruation, except for some of the new 1AR cards that I'll answer in a second, but they have conceded our theory of language and objection and the thesis of our criticism. The 1AR dropped the 2 strict evidence, which is a K of masculine compassion. It's what I'm going to sit on because it will frame your decision. All their impact framing arguments and claims that only the app can save the thousands dying now is a form of masculine compassion that requires you to denigrate all feminine concerns in order to give that suffering coherence. Our strict evidence is phenomenal. It indicts their form of redressing suffering, their attempt to invoke sympathy from you and convince you that we are the unethical people because we don't uncritically accept single payer is a form of aesthetic sexism that tells women debaters that we can never live up to their perfect enactment of masculine compassion. This is even more true given the 1AR's claim that I am ethically blackmailing you
The inverse is true. Women can think about the suffering of others, but we can never relieve that suffering of extinction because we failed that universality. We failed to universally sympathize with all the other people who would die from extinction. Their framing of political engagement and impact calculus is masculine transcendence, where men who lack an identifiable bodily subject position are the only ones capable of recognizing and alleviating the suffering of others. This is contrasted with women's confinement to the bodily realm, which localizes our politics and precludes us from politicizing disparate groups. You should stop pretending like the absence somehow saves the thousands of people dying now by speaking the plan into existence. We have been framing arguments about how you should conceive of the plan. Ethical blackmail is still blackmail. They weaponize the plan against women debaters and menstrual activists so they can consolidate their own masculine privilege, so they can say, no, we are good people. Look at all these people who are dying out there. Look at all these women that we save with single payer, while they and you all get to absolve yourselves of masculinity in debate. Their new Putnam card is a net card. It literally says that some feminists deny the distinction between the public and private. This says that dichotomy itself is bad. Our argument is that their notion of politics is what upholds that. Hence our claim of the public-private dichotomy. The framework debate single payer doesn't have to happen in a vacuum because menstrual blood searchers are unconscious ideology, which over-determines their research practices, causes them to create false knowledge, which means even if I don't win any sort of case term, this is still where you hedge your ballot. The one he sees an object of research, the role of the negatives to disprove the various means, and therefore research plan focus restricts the debate to a 10-second statement and leaves the rest of the after question. The debate is always a question of research. If you can't defend the things that you say, then what is the point of policy debate? This is why we are here. The one I just said, the links need to be tied to the plan. We mean that there's no bright line for plan focus. Not all the 1AC cards are about the plan. This isn't a personal attack. The fact that they think this is a personal attack only proves our argument about them objecting menstruation to the point where they feel personally offended. Subject formation comes before weighing the effects of the plan. Politics and debate are oversaturated with masculine ideology, which favors detachment from our lived experiences and embodied positions. It's uniquely true for women in debate who are constantly told that our concerns are subsidiary to claims of objectivity. Rather, the question should be how masculinity informs debate and healthcare itself. Our argument is simple: disembodied perspectives, and the focus on objectivity perpetuates feminine exclusion from debate and politics insofar as we maintain a feminine perspective, but also ensures that they produce politics and research which are dangerous and violent for feminine subjects. You have been biased. You favor the calculative risk of planned implementation at the expense of your embodied position, especially you do judges, which are all these arguments I was making about gender and communication. Menstruators don't have to be fair. Appeals to fairness are rooted in the supposedly neutral subject of debate. This constructs a transcendent masculine subject as the norm against which we demonize difference embodied experience, which always allows and denigrates abject femininity generally, and menstruation in particular. Menstrual blood becomes a signifier of what Kentucky finds wrong with debate. Femininity out of control, which reveals their internal fear of disorder. Next, rather than continue to shame and discomfort women, vote negative to discomfort masculinity and re-signify menstruation by staying in debate with us. Overcome this taboo of menstruation and femininity by smearing blood through the public sphere to reclaim the agency of feminine debaters and the value of debate in society. For Jenna and Natalie, you already know the value of your ballot. For Nick, T. Cram, and Stephen, you should betray that masculine desire and dwell in the uncomfortability of your decision to forfeit menstrual practice, which is warranted by our McDonald evidence. The permutation makes no sense given all these arguments that we have made about form and the nature of debate. The fact that we've impact turned their form of public deliberation, so they cannot go for it, which means that they cannot go for the permutation would make no sense in the context of menstrual activism. And what, and then in the context of menstrual activism, what it requires their new link turn argument is brand new, should have been read in the 2AC. They don't cover it. It's not in the plain text. It's not mandated. It's not anywhere in the 1AC. You shouldn't allow this because it's a form of strategic masculinity, which Derek already impact turn was dropped by the 1AR. You should refuse that move to masculine innocence, or else it leads to gendered serial policy failure. There's sure evidence is a link in it. It says that healthcare can't be adequate as long as you conceive of it as being insurance. They wrote a link to the plan for us via their own evidence. They can't access any of their movements claims because they've conceded they don't have a right to that solidarity because they have no relationship to those movements. Hence all of our claims of embodiment that I have already other claims of embodiment that I've already made about the permutation that makes no sense. I've already answered their ballot evidence, and all their other link turn arguments don't make any sense because our Winkler and Ruff evidence of the 1NR makes a sequencing plan that says that the alternative has to come first, or else menstrual practice becomes ineffective because we have to destigmatize it first. We have to make people feel comfortable about talking about it before single payer has any sort of revolutionary effect on in the context of menstruation. I've already answered the other arguments about ethical blackmail. They say that that we can talk about this. Oh yeah, outside of debate, we can just go talk to them. No, they wouldn't do. Their argument is literally that we should just
pushed it to the private sphere. We should just go talk about this later. Don't make us talk about this shit in debate, because that makes us really uncomfortable. We don't want to talk about it. We only want to talk about the plan and not ourselves as debaters. This is masculine innocence.
254.
That stand is precarious.
Oh yeah.
It'll be the order of the linear I'm going to put in. The order we've been following. So straight down. Basically. Is everybody good to go? If we win firm, if we win the debate, they have no argument for why their sort of discourse and the performance within the debate, even if it unsettled or made some people uncomfortable and unsettled, discourses that exist and are dominant in debate spaces in the status quo, they have no argument for how that spills over into outside political spaces. Only our argument has any hope of challenging the political arrangements that render access to healthcare precarious for women across the country. And also, they've conceded that disease causes extinction. If we win our impact framing argument, that categorically outweighs it. Preconditions to access to value. If we win our affirmative arguments, it definitively outweighs because it inverts their uncomfortability arguments. They've conceded the 1 year argument that the Pamela and Armstrong evidence says that there is a psychological and structural tendency to dismiss existential threats, and people are uncomfortable thinking about their own deaths. Sort of the same argument for how they're sort of the same warrant for why their argument for sort of the same warrant for their argument for why people are uncomfortable thinking about menstruation as the source of their own death. The permutation definitely solves all of their arguments because the alternative solvency literally just stems from the sort of incorporation of the incorporation of a performance that unsettles comfortability. That obviously does not trade off for a demand with a single pair. The 2NR extends the uncomfortability argument and sort of the poetics of the 1NC as solvency arguments. The idea that they should get to win just because they were the first to introduce them is subverted by all traditional debate standards of competition, which are much better because they are the only way that we can compare, make praxeological comparisons and determine where we should focus as activists. If we win framework, we automatically win. They conceded our clash offense that outweighs all the other impacts on a theoretical level. It's the process by which all the benefits of debate are operationalized. We gain the most from the activity as a whole, which is something we all agree about, which means that if we win, that they heard that dialogic process, you should vote affirmative on this alone. They dropped a link to this argument because there are infinite components of the 1EC that we can't prepare to defend. Their argument was literally that the 1EC is a research object, but there are infinite aspects of this performance that they could criticize. The plan, any word, phrase, or a method of pronunciation, the sort of body language that the 1A used to deliver the speech, all of that could be part of the 1EC. That causes shallow debates and ignores the substance of the plan. Here's the question: what should the 1EC have said? Should every 1EC just totally ignore the topic? Should affirmatives always address every violation in debate before they reach the threshold of being an argument? Their framework makes it impossible for affirmatives to talk about issues that don't directly affect them, which the conceded ethical localism argument from the 1AR. We should that the 1AR did make in order to answer their argument about sort of solidarity and taking credit for movements. It is good for us to learn about things that are outside our individual spheres of existence. Dan and I are cis white guys, but researching women and how healthcare affects them dramatically alters our outlook toward the world. And also, this offense fundamentally misunderstands our coalition's argument. Our argument was never that Dan and I, as individuals, sort of deserve the credit for those movements, or that we as individuals are aligning with movements. The movement's argument was always an internal link from enacting a single payer because it creates coalitions and mobilizes people, which means that it's just a question of which policy goals are worth pursuing. They say the plan focuses restricts the debate. That is totally wrong. It is a false choice meant to make you think that you're a bad person for voting affirmative. There are tons of topic-based debates about women and menstruation just to engage in. We are not saying that you should not discuss those issues or cannot discuss those issues, just that they have to be reasons the plan is bad. Subject formation does not come first. It's an evolving process, but clash depends on being upheld. They say debate is unfair. They dropped lots of factors go into making that funny coaching debate a speed here debate. Debate will never be perfectly fair, but that's not a reason to reject our model of debate, because doing so destroys the very possibility for clash to exist in the first place. There's also a multiplicity of awesome women in the community who have been incredibly successful at plant-based arguments, regardless of the hurdles thrown in their way by sexism in the community. Proves their argument essentializes female debaters, then it doesn't make fairness impossible. No, we are not tokenizing that we're taking credit for their victories in the face of adversity. We are just saying that they don't have an internal link to total unfairness in debate. They also have no reason why it is important to frame a non-plan-based objections within the debate space. Dan's argument was not that you should take something out of the public space and into the private space. There, a conflation of debate with the public space is exactly the sort of a thing that their own Peterson evidence is criticizing. Dan's point was just the discussions of censoring a menstrual praxis that is not center on discussions about the plan. It does not have to occur within an adversarial space in which two teams are comparing and debating about whether or not a plan is a good idea. The debate space is a unique space because it allows us to discuss policy options that are outside of our control and discuss their hypothetical implementation, which has unique pedagogical value because it shapes our aspirations as activists. A strict argument that they made. Our argument was not personal shaming. We never said that they are unethical. Saying that rejoining their praxis is intrinsically violent and entrenches masculinity prevents any disagreement about praxis, which is important because they have to define our aspirations as movement builders and define the questions that we should aspire to. The public-private distinction argument, the Putnam card is definitely not a net card. It says that while the distinction overall is artificial, there are aspects of privacy that are worth upholding for female activists because female activists have made pragmatic appeals to privacy in the past in order to justify things like access to reproductive care, which are obviously a good thing. Permutation, debate, the link arguments at the top. First, they made this medically necessary link argument. The 1AR read a piece of evidence that says that medically necessary care includes access to tampons and other products that allow women to take control of their menstrual cycle. The argument was not new. The 2EC made the argument that there is a dialogic process for defining what medically necessary is. The 1AR piece of evidence substantiated that, but that was an argument that was present all the way from the 1EC crossings. There's a bunch of net benefits of the permutation.
They didn't say we didn't cover it until the block.
They didn't say that we didn't cover it until the block. That was an entirely new argument. The 1AR piece of evidence is obviously justified in response to that argument. The medically necessary logic is liberating for women because we are the piece of Ballard evidence says that a medically necessary logic allows women to engage in a dialogical process with their doctor in order to negotiate what kind of care that they want. Their argument that is labor might be regrettable, but if dialogue is sufficient to be labor, then labor is inevitable because the distribution of power and the access to medical resources do not change on their own. If their argument is that they should never have to participate in labor and only have to make performative utterances to change the structure of debate, that is never going to be sufficient to change the alignments of power, which has been our answer to their theory of discourse and their theory of language all along. Our net benefit is that single payer, and the net benefit to the permutation is that inclusion of single payer is good and does not trade off with their arguments. The Awig evidence said that it's a prerequisite to challenging gender norms because healthcare and private insurance are used to lock women in positions of abjection that don't allow them to challenge the dominant rhetorics of femininity. Their single payer and especially single payer is especially helpful for challenging the conflation of femininity with domesticity because healthcare is currently attached to a woman's operation of the public sphere, which women are awfully foreclosed for. The sure argument about insurance, that piece of evidence just says that the insurential logic of private insurance is bad. Obviously, the conclusion of that author is that single payer would be a good remedy for that because it gives you access to healthcare regardless of your level of individual risk. It deprivatizes responsibility for care, which is why it's a good affirmation to make.